Imagine you are an archaeologist in the 1920s, digging around in the dusty, dark, slightly cursed tomb of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. You brush away the sand, open a sealed clay jar, and instead of an ancient scroll or a trap that triggers a giant rolling boulder, you find a snack. And not just any snack, but a snack you can actually eat right then and there without instantly dying of dysentery. If you leave a perfectly good sandwich on your kitchen counter for a week, it becomes a terrifying science experiment. Leave it for a month, and it will probably develop a complex economy, invent the wheel, and declare war on your fruit bowl. That is because the universe has a very strict rule: food goes bad. Bacteria, yeast, and fungi are absolutely everywhere, and they are very, very hungry. Give them some moisture, some nutrients, and a little bit of time, and they will turn your expensive organic groceries into a foul-smelling mush. But there is one very weird, very sticky exception to this universal rule. Honey. You could theoretically eat honey that was sitting around while the pyramids of Giza were still under construction, and it would taste exactly the same as the stuff sitting in the little plastic bear in your pantry right now. It does not rot. It does not spoil. It just sits there, forever, defying the laws of nature. Which raises the question, why is honey basically immortal? To understand why honey does not go bad, you first have to understand what makes things go bad in the first place. Microbes, like bacteria and fungi, are basically microscopic freeloaders. And just like any freeloader, they need water to survive. If you take away the water, they die. It is the exact same reason humans have been salting meat and drying fruit for thousands of years. But honey takes this dehydration concept to an absolute extreme. Honey is what scientists call hygroscopic. This is a fancy, $10 word that simply means it is desperately thirsty. In its natural state, honey contains very little water, usually around 17%. But it is overwhelmingly made of sugar. And sugar loves water more than anything else in the world. So, if a stray, optimistic bacterium lands in a jar of honey hoping for a free meal, the honey does not just sit there. It actively attacks. Because the honey has so little water and the bacterium has a lot of water, the sugar molecules literally suck the moisture right out of the bacterium's cell walls in a process called osmosis. The bacterium shrivels up and dies almost instantly. It is the microscopic equivalent of dropping a water balloon into a vacuum chamber. So, reason number one that honey does not spoil is that it is a sugary desert that dehydrates its enemies to death. But that alone is not enough to keep it fresh for 3 millennia. Plenty of things are dry, but they still eventually break down. So, honey has a second line of defense: it is surprisingly acidic. It has a pH level somewhere between 3 and 4.5. For context, that puts it right around the same acidity level as tomatoes or vinegar. Most of the nasty bacteria that spoil food or make you violently ill, like Salmonella or E. coli, absolutely hate acid. They need a nice, neutral environment to thrive. If you drop them into an acidic pool of honey, they essentially melt. So now we have a substance that not only sucks the water out of living things, but also dissolves them with acid. But wait, there is more. Because the real secret to honey's immortality comes from the terrifying, wonderful creatures that make it. Bees. To make honey, a bee flies around, drinks nectar from a flower, and stores it in a special extra stomach literally called a honey stomach. Please subscribe to this almost dead YouTube channel, I am begging you, it will take 3 seconds and it validates my existence. Anyway, the bee flies back to the hive, regurgitates the nectar, and passes it to another bee. Yes, honey is technically bee vomit. But it is highly weaponized bee vomit. When the nectar is sloshing around inside the bee's stomach, it mixes with a very specific enzyme called glucose oxidase. When the bees barf this mixture back up into the honeycomb, that enzyme breaks the nectar down into 2 distinct things. The first is gluconic acid, which is what gives honey its acidity. The second thing is hydrogen peroxide. Yes, the exact same bubbling chemical you pour on a scraped knee to kill germs. So, every single jar of honey is packed with a slow-release hydrogen peroxide system. The bees then spend hours fanning the honeycomb with their tiny wings to evaporate the remaining water, sealing the deal. They create a substance so perfectly hostile to life that absolutely nothing can survive inside it, except, ironically, the energy the bees themselves need to survive the winter. It is an absolute masterpiece of natural chemistry. It is a highly acidic, severely dehydrating, bacteria-killing bioweapon that just happens to taste absolutely fantastic on a toasted bagel. But as it turns out, just because honey never goes bad, does not mean it is always safe to eat. Which brings us to the twist. Because honey is essentially just a concentrated reflection of whatever the bees were eating at the time. And sometimes, Bees eat poison. In places like the Black Sea region of Turkey, or high up in the Himalayas, bees often collect nectar from certain species of rhododendron flowers. These flowers contain grainotoxins, which are highly poisonous to human beings, but completely and utterly harmless to bees. The bees process this toxic nectar using their standard vomit and flap method, turning it into what is known locally as mad honey. If you eat a spoonful of mad honey, it won't be rotten. It will still have the acid, the hydrogen peroxide, and the low moisture content that keeps it immortal. But it will also absolutely send you on a terrifying hallucinogenic trip, drop your blood pressure to dangerously low levels, and potentially stop your heart. In fact, this immortal toxic honey has actually been used as a weapon of war. Back in 67 BC, King Mithridates of Pontus was being chased by a massive Roman army led by Pompey the Great. Mithridates knew he couldn't beat the Romans in a fair fight, so he got creative. He ordered his men to leave hundreds of jars of mad honey along the path of the advancing Roman army. The Roman soldiers, who were probably thrilled to find free, perfectly preserved snacks just sitting on the side of the road, eagerly ate the honey. Within hours, the soldiers became violently ill, entirely delirious, and completely incapable of fighting. Mithridates' army simply walked back and easily defeated them. So, the honey didn't go bad, but the day definitely did for the Romans. Ultimately, the reason you can eat 3,000-year-old honey without a second thought is because it isn't just a sweet treat. It is a perfectly engineered, impenetrable fortress. It is a chemical death trap for microbes, built by fuzzy flying insects through a tedious process of repeated regurgitation and relentless wing flapping. It relies on a delicate combination of extreme sugar concentration, high acidity, and literal wound-cleaning chemicals to stay pristine until the end of time. It is quite literally one of the only foods on Earth that actively fights back against the relentless, inevitable decay of the universe. Just make sure you check exactly what kind of flowers your local bees have been visiting, because the only thing worse than eating ancient bee vomit is eating ancient, hallucination-inducing bee vomit.